Hello.
How are you? Haven't seen you in a while. I've been thinking about Johnny.
It is currently 4:30 in the morning and I'm up because I woke up early and couldn't get back to sleep, so I thought I'd film a video. And I'm filming it on my new Lumix camera that I got secondhand on Facebook Marketplace. What has it been? 6 months since I last filmed a video?
I'm here, don't panic. I'm back. For now. A lot of you feel like I owe you an explanation as to where I've been, why I was gone, what I've been doing, and I guess I would like to say that I don't owe any of you anything. How dare you? How dare you? I make YouTubes when I want to make YouTubes. It's my site, my rules. Okay? I shouldn't have to answer to any cunt. You know, I'm sorry, but you get what you're given. And right now I feel like giving, okay? So, please enjoy. You're finally getting your wish.
I actually did film videos, but I filmed them on this camera that I got for Christmas. And this camera, it looks good, but actually the quality is really shit, and it doesn't even have an SD card that would actually go into a laptop. It has an SD card that's like a mobile phone SD card, so it doesn't even connect to anything. And when I tried looking at the user manual, there isn't one.
Really?
And it's like some Amazon affiliated company that's now been dissolved, and it's a new camera, so...
I can't do a bitch like it.
Yeah, I needed a new camera because I didn't want to film on my phone anymore because I take ages editing and then the quality is like 320p and what is it, 2007? Hopefully on this new camera it's decent quality. So yeah, here we are. Most people this time of the year are doing their mid-year reading wrap-ups for books they've read this year that they liked. But because last year I didn't really end up wrapping anything up, this video is going to be me doing that. I do like going back through my channel. I can see, based on each year, what books I liked. So that's why I did this video, even though it's probably way too late to do it, but who cares? So I've got piles of books, and I'm going to do it in books I read in 2021 that were published in 2021 that I liked and disliked, and books that I read in 2021 that weren't published that year, but that I still liked.
Now, let us begin.
I think I will start with My Phantoms. I did a review of this and loved it, as I do all Gwendoline Riley's books. It's about a mother-daughter relationship, histrionic retired mother bothering her daughter in her mid-40s who's got a PhD and a husband and doesn't want anything to do with her, basically. And it's all about how their pasts keep coming back to haunt them and whether they can break the cycles. It was a bit of a departure for Gwendoline Riley in the style because the style was so pared back, and that was quite refreshing actually. And they've actually recently came out with the paperback for this, and I actually prefer the paperback edition because I just think the cover looks more interesting. The hardback cover I have, you know, it is nice, but the garish green looks like, you know, some thriller. Doesn't really match the book, in my opinion.
I'm just giving my opinion.
Okay, on to the next book. The next novel that was probably one of my favourites was Dead Souls by Sam Riviere. Now, he's best known as a poet. He wrote the poetry collection The Marriage of Kim Kardashian. You might think by the sound of that collection that it's going to be really easy to understand, but it's not. His work is like highly stylised and intelligent and clever. And this book is all of those things. So in this book, you follow this narrator who's, I guess, a poetry critic, and he goes to this like Travelodge poetry event where they spend their night at the bar just talking about the poetry world, and this poet figure, this young poet who's been ostracised from the poetry community for allegations of plagiarism. So the whole novel is just this shitfest on the poetry world and the publishing world, and it is very fun, very funny. It's stream of consciousness, written really beautifully. Would highly recommend. And I haven't seen anybody else talk about this book, and I wonder why that is. I guess maybe people aren't interested that much in poetry, but I am, and I loved it. But I do think that they could have made a much better effort on this cover. Like, it's grey, you can barely even read what it says. Like, it's almost like they didn't want anyone to read this book.
I am disgusted.
And if you didn't know, if a cover is a really nice cover that people like, it can actually influence the sales of a book by over 300%. So I feel like when publishers don't make an effort with the book, it is literally like they aren't fussed whether people read it or not. So yeah, that's a shame about the cover, but it is a nice book and I would highly recommend it. And that was his debut novel as well, so I wonder if he's going to come out with more novels. If he does, I shall read them. And the next book is actually a poetry collection. This is Bird of Winter by Alice Hiller, and this is published by Liverpool University Press, who I didn't know published poetry, but apparently they do. And this collection is really fragmented. There's lots of erasure poems. There's lots of asides where the main poem is up here and then there's extra print there. And sometimes those are just footnotes, but a lot of the time they are actually part of the poem as well. So I thought that was really interesting. All in all, the collection, a lot of it deals with childhood trauma, though a lot of people might find this quite depressing. But I thought it was written so beautifully. And it was actually quite easy to follow, even though it was fragmented, so I did appreciate that. And there were also some really great lines in there. Here's one line I liked. "This memory comes shagged with flies." Thought that was great. Okay, and next, this is a book published in 2020, I think, but it was published at the end. I read this at the start of 2021, basically, and this has been my favourite Anne Enright. This was Actress. It's about an Irish woman who reflects on the relationship with her mother, who was this kind of Judy Garland figure. Her mother had this kind of failed career, and it's all about the cost of success and then the kind of fallout of that if it ends up not really being a success. It kind of felt like a response to The Gathering to me. The Gathering is probably Anne Enright's most famous book, and it won the Booker Prize in like 2007 or something, and I didn't like that book. Veronica, she was the narrator of that book, I think, and it was just so depressing, and she was so repressed. Like, she wouldn't have sex at all. Nothing really happened. It was all the lead up to this funeral, and then when the funeral happened I was like, is this it? But this book, Actress, there was loads of sex in it, like seedy sex scenes with seedy men, and I just thought that was great. So yes, loved Actress and would highly recommend it. And next is a book I read in 2021. I think it was published at the end of 2020 maybe, and that would be Red Comet by Heather Clark, which is the Sylvia Plath biography. This was so well researched, did a whole review of this. Yeah, this was lush. I would happily reread that. I'd say it's a must-have for anyone interested in Sylvia Plath. Okay, and now on to the books published in 2021 that I didn't like. Okay, so first up, I'll go with Open Water by Caleb Zumar Nelson. Now, this has actually been really critically acclaimed in the UK. This book's set in London, and it's made out to be this, you know, modern black love story. And to me, it really fell flat. It didn't even seem like a love story to me. It seemed like a kind of half-assed relationship, situationship with the guy who lives in London, the young guy, and then he's dating this girl who is at uni in Dublin, but she's from London. And they kind of see each other off and on. A lot of the time when they were talking about books and music, there were loads of nods to other black authors and artists, and I loved that. But it also didn't really delve into it. Can't even remember the guy's name, but he worked as a photographer, and there was barely anything about his photography. And it made me think of this book by David Dabadine called The Intended, which I love this book. The main character in this is from Guyana, and he comes to the UK and he feels like a total outsider, but at the same time he's at uni. And in this book there's a character who's a photographer, and you really get the sense of the art behind the photography, and I thought that works really well in this book. This was published decades ago, but if you're interested in post-colonial literature at all, I would highly recommend this book. And it had me thinking of this book because when I read this, I was like, is there anything really that artful about this book? You know, really in it, the writing wasn't particularly strong. Sometimes it was cliched.
I was appalled.
But there was a short story at the end that was written really beautifully, so I do think he's a good writer. But I just think this book isn't a very strong book. And it's only 150 pages or something as well. What else? There was also the word Uber in it at least 15 times. So after I finished this book, I thought I never ever want to read the word Uber again in a novel. Just sick of it.
That's sickening.
Yeah, with this book, it got me thinking about how, you know, there's loads of prizes for debut novels, and this seems to be swooping up loads of these. And I just wonder what's going to happen when he publishes his second novel, because it's probably going to be twice as good as this novel. And I bet it won't get that much attention, maybe. And that's quite sad, because what message does that send to the author? And even readers, really. So yeah, he is a writer that I'll keep my eye on, but I don't think this book is that good.
Sorry folks, but that's the truth.
Here's another book by a black author that was much better than Open Water. Now, I don't think this was an amazing book, but I do think it was a good debut and innovative in some ways. It's told in these little vignettes, and there's also these interstices of like a spider web being constructed. So there's lots of allusions to the Igbo culture, which is a Nigerian tribe. So I love that, and it's just interesting because no one seems to be talking about this book. It doesn't really seem to be getting on any prize lists, but yet this one that isn't half as good is. And I think that's because this book is probably a lot more commercial than this one, so take that for what it is. If I had to recommend one over the other, it would be this, and that's the truth.
I'm honestly being honest, and you can't hang me for that.
Okay, and what was another book that was awful? Hardly needs to be said. There were actually moments that I really enjoyed about this book. There were parts where Alice was talking about her emotional life, which I loved, and where she was dishing the tea on her career. And there were also some moments of dialogue that were good. But then there were these other moments that were just so cringe, like some of the cringiest scenes I've read. Like there was one scene between Simon and Eileen where they were having phone sex, right? And their idea of phone sex was stuff like, oh my god, Simon, if I was your wife, I would be taking my frilly little bra off and I would be getting on my knees for you. And then he was replying to her being like, and if I was your husband, I'd be, you know, licking you out, or whatever filth they were talking about.
You piece of filth!
But I was like, really? This is exploring heteronormative relationships? It seemed like scraping the barrel, really. And I was like, if this is how straight people have phone sex and really interact with each other, I was like, I'm glad that I'm not straight and would never ever have to be part of this. Which isn't really what you want to come away from a book feeling, is it?
I think that's a terrible thing to do.
And I did like the climax of the novel where all the friends meet up in Alice's house and they start bickering. I thought that bit was good. I do think Sally Rooney's a decent writer, but this book I thought needed a going over. And I've also had nearly 5,000 views on the review I did of this now. So if you came to my channel through this book, thank you. Welcome. Okay, the next book is also in the Sally Rooney vein of things, which is Exciting Times by Niamh Dolan, not sure how you pronounce that. And actually, in the little quotes on the front, it says the new Sally Rooney, as if Sally Rooney's like 80 years old. But this book I DNF'd by page, what was it, by page 30 at the most. And it followed this girl, can't remember her name, but what does she do? I guess she teaches abroad in like Hong Kong, and I think she's teaching English abroad. And she's from Ireland, and this book was just so emotionally arrogant, and it got on my nerves so much, even from the first few pages. Here's chapter 2. I'd been sad in Dublin, decided it was Dublin's fault, and thought Hong Kong would help. Like, just that as a standalone paragraph. People don't really think like that. And at the same time, she's like revealing this vulnerability to the reader, but it's done in such a almost like flamboyant way. It's meant to draw me in, but really it was just like making me recoil. There was some also budding romance with some guy called Julian, who's meant to be this banker or something, and I could tell the book was trying to make him seem really sexy, and their relationship just seemed so childish. Because I was skimming ahead, and there was one bit where it was something like they were living together for a while, and like she went like 5 days without speaking to him, which, first of all, isn't that a form of emotional abuse? Just saying. But he was fine, and it was just so childish and silly and exaggerated, and I didn't like it.
I couldn't believe it. I really could not believe it.
I mean, people who like Sally Rooney, maybe they would like that book, but to me, it repulsed me.
It's disgusting.
And the final book that was one of the worst reads for 2021 was this book by Amy Woolard, Neck of the Woods. This is a poetry collection. It was published end of 2020, because I didn't get it till 2021, so I'm counting that. To me, this is the kind of poetry collection I probably would have liked when I was like 15. Like, a lot of the poems were trying to be really edgy, and there was lots of kind of like plathy imagery. Yeah, there's lots of bells and things like mannequins and stuff like that, and it kept doing this thing where it would say a cliche and then it would change like the last word in the cliche, and it was like the poet was trying to be like, do you see what I did there? And I was like, yes, I did see, and it didn't impress me. I think this book would probably appeal to like young women more than me, really. I think it's meant for them, basically, because every other poem had stuff like, the girl ran through the woods, the girl sat up like a gun, you know, and I just didn't like that. It got on my nerves. Like, here's one poem. A place where there isn't any trouble. Girl walks into a house and comes out running. Girl runs down a neighbourhood street and a pickup rolls up beside her. Storm's coming. Aunt says, girl, you know there's monsters out there. Aunt says, girl, there are monsters in this world you'll call friends in the next. Storms that'll write your name in the sky. Hated it.
Get out. Trash.
And it's so rare for me to not like a poetry collection much. But I think there were only one or two poems in there that I thought were of any merit, which is a shame. Finally, I am on to talking about the books that weren't published in 2021, but which I read in 2021, which I liked. First up, we've got Vainglory by Ronald Furbank. I also read the other novellas in this book, which are Inclinations and Caprice, and I also read The Flower Beneath the Foot. I actually didn't like the other novels I read, except for Vainglory, which was his first novel, and I just thought Vainglory was so clever. It was kind of Virginia Woolf-ish, but also a bit Henry James-ish, and I'm not quite sure how to describe it. I would say his work straddles Victorian fiction and modernist fiction, because I think when he was writing it was like 1914, around that time, so it was really when the kind of cultural changeover was happening between those eras. I thought this book was so good. It was so funny. It was just a lot of these upper class people, and I think it was set during World War I as well, actually, and it took place all over one day. Was she a widow? And she was spending some of her leftover money from her husband. I think she was putting a stained glass window into a cathedral or something like that, so from the window in her house she can watch the window being built, and that happens throughout the day, and throughout the whole day she's crying and falling out with people, and these women friends come to see her and they're all just bickering, and it's all very silly and camp and garish. It was also really beautifully written, almost like Baroque in the style, so I really loved that, and I think if you like Virginia Woolf, I think you would like Vainglory. Another one that was one of my favourites was The Buddha of Suburbia by Hanif Kureishi. This follows a guy, I think his family came over from India, and he's the first generation born in the UK. It's set in London, and I think it's the 80s, and there's like drugs and feminism, and there's characters that represent those things, and it's kind of shitting on multiculturalism but in a fun, wry way. So if you like Zadie Smith, who was also influenced by this book actually, yeah, I think you would love this. Right, and oh, my big pile fell over. Oh well. What else? The next one would be Breathing Lessons by Anne Tyler, and this was set over one day as well, and it follows this married couple. Are they both retired? I think they're both retired. Set in America. They go to this funeral of, I think, maybe a family friend who died, and throughout the whole day it focuses on the mother character, and after the funeral she sees all these old friends, and it's kind of nostalgic without ever being sentimental, which is a really clever thing to do. The latter half of the novel focused on her coming back from the funeral. She's like bickering with her husband and stuff, but she also is trying to kind of keep her family together because she's got kids, but now they're all grown up, and she's trying to keep them all together even though they're all going their separate ways. So yeah, I absolutely love this.
I just had the most wonderful time.
I loved this book.
And I can see why it won the Pulitzer Prize. I definitely want to read more Anne Tyler. I think A Patchwork Planet is the one I want to read of hers next.
Time to move along.
Yeah, the next would have to be Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. This is a historical novel, and it follows this guy, I think it is, who is interviewing this woman who's a murderess, a convicted murderess, and she's in prison, but she works in this like rich lady's house as like a seamstress and maid. But while she's there, even though she's really quiet and really good at being a seamstress and maid, everyone's like scared of her, and it's really sensationalised. They're all like, she could murder us at any moment. So he's interviewing her, and he's really kind of intrigued, almost obsessed by her, really. And the novel goes into whether she is really a murderess or how she got to be where she is. And I thought it was done so well. I think it's set in the 19th century, and it's set in Canada. And I just felt like Margaret Atwood had done so much research. That's what I don't know if she did, but that's what it felt like. It was really beautifully written. Although she did mention the flowers all the time. There were loads of peonies like in every chapter. So that annoyed me. But apart from that, it was so well done.
Perfection.
If you like Margaret Atwood but you haven't read Alias Grace yet, would highly recommend it. And the next I want to read by her is The Blind Assassin, I think. Okay, and now the last book. This was one of the best poetry collections I read last year, and that would be Flesh by Mary Jean Chan. A lot of the poems explore like queer bodies and queer relationships and stuff, but the main theme of the collection is actually fencing, on guard, and the different moves in fencing structure the collection, so I thought that was great and really interesting, and it's playing with language in lots of ways because I think she's Chinese originally, so there's lots of references to Chinese poetry and Chinese cultures, which I thought was great. And I also like that it's slightly wider than other books, which means the lines can run on in different ways. So even though there's lots of fencing poems throughout, there's lots of quiet poems as well. Here was one poem. It was called They Would Have All That. To sing the evening home, she prepares a pot of lentil stew, her phone radiant with messages, imagining her lover's steady hand gripping her own phone to navigate towards some notion of home, their flat a familiar place of worship, their bodies growing close and moving apart with the regularity of heartbeat, hot breath. There the lover is, running to catch a bus. Even if you don't read poetry that much, you would love this, I think. Yeah, it was lush.
It was good, wasn't it? Let's face it.
Okay, that's all the books. Thanks for staying around if you did.
Well, thanks for everything. It's been a real slice.
I haven't been here in so long.
You still love me, don't you?
I'm not judging, I'm just judging.
My next videos are going to be some reviews of new releases, and I've also got Sylvia Plath videos in the works, so stick around. Bye.